So today we are going to look at the cranial cavity, and before we move on to look at the various parts of the cranial cavity, let us divide the cranial cavity into various parts. So anteriorly is the anterior cranial fossa, posterior to that is the middle cranial fossa, and finally the posterior most is the posterior cranial fossa. So we will look at these cranial fossa one by one. So starting with the boundaries of the anterior cranial fossa. So anteriorly it is bounded by the frontal bone here. Then laterally again it is bounded by the frontal bone, and posteriorly it is bounded by the posterior margin of the lesser wing of the sphenoid bone. So these are the boundaries of the anterior cranial fossa. Now what are the various bones that are forming the anterior cranial fossa? Firstly, there is the cribriform plate of the ethmoid bone, which you can see here. This is the cribriform plate. Then here is the orbital plate of the frontal bone on each side of the cribriform plate. And then there is the superior surface of the lesser wing of the sphenoid, right? So this is the superior surface. Here is the body, and here are the lesser wings of the sphenoid bone. Then what are the various features we see in this anterior cranial fossa? Anterior most, you can see a protuberance which is known as the frontal crest. Behind the frontal crest, there is a vertical projection from the perpendicular plate of the ethmoid bone. This vertical projection is known as the crista galli, and this is important because it gives an attachment to the falx cerebri. Right. After looking at the crista galli, we see a foramen just anterior to the crista galli, and this foramen here is known as the foramen cecum. This is usually blind, but when it is patent, it transmits a vein from the nose draining into the superior sagittal sinus. Then on either side of the crista galli is the cribriform plate, which is perforated, and it has multiple foramina which transmit olfactory nerves from the nose to the olfactory bulb. Then you may also find anterior and posterior ethmoidal canals which are not very visible in this specimen, and these canals transmit the anterior and posterior ethmoidal nerves and vessels. Behind we see the two anterior crinoid processes. These anterior crinoid processes, these give attachment to the free margin of the tentorium cerebelli, right? So these are the two anterior crinoid processes. And finally, we have the free posterior margin of the lesser wing of the sphenoid. So now we come on to the middle cranial fossa. So to begin with, let us see the various boundaries. So anterior boundaries are formed by the posterior free margin of the lesser wing of the sphenoid on each side, then the two anterior crinoid processes, and finally the anterior border of the sulcus chiasmaticus. This is the sulcus chiasmaticus. So these are the anterior boundaries. So the posterior boundaries are formed by the superior border of the petrous temporal bone on each side, then the posterior crinoid processes which are not very prominent in this specimen, and the dorsum celli, which is the projection between the two posterior crinoid processes. Now let us see what are the various bones forming this middle cranial fossa. So firstly is the anterior surface of the body of the sphenoid, right? The superior surface of the body of the sphenoid, the greater wing of the sphenoid on each side, then the petrous temporal bone on each side, and finally the squamous temporal bone laterally. So these are the four bones forming the middle cranial fossa. Now let us see the various features in each of these parts. So firstly, on the body of the sphenoid, firstly there is the sulcus chiasmaticus, above and behind which lies the optic chiasma. Behind this optic chiasma lies the tuberculum celli, which is the transverse projection, and it is related to the anterior intercavernous sinus. Behind that is the hypophyseal fossa, and posterior most between the two posterior crinoid processes is the dorsum celli, which is related to the posterior intercavernous sinus. Now there is a very important opening on each side of the sulcus chiasmaticus. This opening is the opening to the optic canal. So here the optic nerve enters the orbit. Then let us come on to the greater wing of the sphenoid. So the various openings in this greater wing of sphenoid, anterior most is the foramen rotundum, which you can see here, and the maxillary division of the trigeminal nerve transmits through this foramen rotundum. Posterior most is the foramen spinosum, through which transmit the meningeal branch of the mandibular nerve and middle meningeal artery. Anterior medial to the foramen spinosum is the foramen ovale, and this foramen ovale transmits the mandibular nerve, the accessory meningeal artery, the lesser petrosal nerve, and the emissary vein from the cavernous sinus to the pterygoid venous plexus. Sometimes you may see an emissary sphenoidal foramen just medial to the foramen ovale, and this emissary sphenoidal foramen transmits an emissary vein from the cavernous sinus to pterygoid venous plexus. Now, what are the various features present on the petrous temporal bone? Firstly, anteromedially is the trigeminal impression, and this trigeminal impression is related to the trigeminal ganglion, the motor root of the mandibular nerve, and the greater petrosal nerve. Laterally on each side are present the hiatus and groove for the greater and lesser petrosal nerves, which are not very visible in this specimen. Posterolaterally, there is a projection on the anterior sloping surface of the petrous temporal bone, which is known as the arcuate eminence. This arcuate eminence is caused by the superior semicircular canal of the internal ear. Now, this superior border of the petrous temporal bone has a groove. This groove is for the superior petrosal sinus, and this gives attachment to the fixed margin of the tentorium cerebelli. Now, one important opening which we left out is the superior orbital fissure, which is present just inferior to the free margin of the lesser wing of sphenoid bone. So here is the superior orbital fissure. Right? Now finally, there is another opening most medially in this middle cranial fossa, and this opening is the foramen lacerum. And this foramen lacerum is present between the apex of the petrous temporal bone and the posterior part of the sphenoid. This foramen lacerum transmits a meningeal branch of ascending pharyngeal artery and an emissary vein from the cavernous sinus to the pterygoid venous plexus. Now finally, coming on to the posterior cranial fossa, let us look at the various boundaries. So anteriorly, it is bounded by the superior border of the petrous temporal bone on each side, the posterior crinoid processes, and the dorsum sellae. So this forms the anterior boundary of the posterior cranial fossa, and it is bounded posteriorly by the squamous part of the occipital bone up to the internal occipital protuberance. Now, what are the various bones that are present in this posterior cranial fossa? The basisphenoid and the basi-occiput together combine to form the clivus. Then there is the squamous part of the occipital bone posteriorly. Then there is the posterior surface of the petrous temporal bone on each side, which also forms the floor of the posterior cranial fossa. Behind the posterior wall of the petrous temporal bone is the mastoid part of the temporal bone on each side. And finally, a little bit of the parietal bone, that is the posterior inferior angle of the parietal bone, forms the posterior cranial fossa. Now, what are the various features of this posterior cranial fossa? Firstly, we look at this big foramen, which is known as the foramen magnum, and this foramen magnum is actually divided into two parts through a transverse ligament of the atlas. So there is a smaller anterior part and a larger posterior part. So each of these parts transmits several structures through this foramen magnum. After looking at the foramen magnum, when we move more posteriorly, there is another protuberance. Like we saw the frontal crest anteriorly, there is the internal occipital crest which runs posteriorly. Now there is a confluence here. It is known as the internal occipital protuberance, and it is actually the site of confluence of various sinuses. On either side of this internal occipital protuberance is the groove for the transverse sinus. This groove for the transverse sinus, this leads on to the groove for the sigmoid sinus. So this groove here is known as the sigmoid sulcus, right? So this is the continuation of the groove for the transverse sinus, and ultimately it leads to the groove for the sigmoid sinus. Then we also see two openings on either side of the foramen magnum through which this probe is passing. This is known as the hypoglossal canal, and this hypoglossal canal transmits the hypoglossal nerve, the meningeal branch of ascending pharyngeal artery, and the emissary vein from the basilar plexus. Just posterior to this hypoglossal canal is the jugular tubercle, which is related to the 9th, 10th and 11th cranial nerves, right? Now, what are the various features we see on the posterior aspect of the petrous temporal bone? Here is a large opening which is known as the internal acoustic meatus, and this transmits the motor and sensory roots of the 7th cranial nerve, the 8th cranial nerve and labyrinthine vessels. The petrooccipital fissure, you can see this fissure here, this lodges the inferior petrosal sinus. So the superior petrosal sinus was at the apex, whereas this petrooccipital fissure lodges the inferior petrosal sinus. The final foramen which we need to look at in the posterior cranial fossa is the jugular foramen here, and this jugular foramen is divided into three parts: an anterior, middle and posterior part. So the anterior part transmits the meningeal branch of the ascending pharyngeal artery and the inferior petrosal sinus. The middle part is the important one, which transmits the 9th, 10th and 11th cranial nerves, and the posterior part transmits the meningeal branch of the occipital artery and also the terminal part of the sigmoid sinus, which is lodged in the sigmoid sulcus. So these are the various features we need to look at in the posterior cranial fossa.